Albert Einstein and Interesting Facts. In the heart of the 20th century, amid war, revolution, and scientific upheaval, one name rose above all others. Not a king, not a general, but a man with a chalkboard and a vision that bent time itself. His name was Albert Einstein. From a humble town in Germany to the ivory halls of Princeton, Einstein's journey was more than scientific, it was human. It was a quest not just for knowledge, but for truth, peace, and understanding in a fractured world. But behind the genius, the wild hair, the twinkling eyes, the quotable charm was a man of contradictions, a rebel and a pacifist, a father and a loner, a mind rooted in logic, yet drawn to the mysteries of the universe. This is the story of how one man reshaped reality. Chapter 1. The Quiet Boy from Ulm. Albert Einstein was born on the 14th of March, 1879, in the southern German city of Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, part of the German Empire. He was born into a secular Jewish family. His father, Hermann Einstein, was an engineer and salesman, and his mother, Pauline Koch, had a passion for music and education. He was not a prodigat, at least not at first. Family stories say Albert was slow to talk, not uttering full sentences until around the age of 4. One servant allegedly called him the dopey one. But this slowness masked a deep and silent curiosity. He would stare for hours at invisible things, pondering, processing. One pivotal moment came when his father showed him a simple compass. The needle, trembling and pointing north as if by magic, haunted young Albert. How could something unseen exert such influence? This unseen force became a metaphor for the mysteries he would chase for the rest of his life. Chapter 2. A Mind at Odds. In school, Einstein clashed with the rigid German education system. He hated rote learning and disliked blind obedience to authority. While his grades in math and physics were excellent, he often butted heads with teachers. One headmaster even told him, "You'll never amount to anything." At home, Pauline nurtured his interest in musique, began playing the violin, a practice that would remain his lifelong refuge. But it was his uncle Jacob, a self-taught engineer, who opened the world of mathematics to him, introducing him to algebra and geometry ahead of his grade level. By age 12, Einstein was devouring books on geometry and philosophy. He would later say that reading Kant as a teenager left a deep impression, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. The family's financial troubles worsened. In 1894, the Einsteins moved to Milan, Italy, but Albert stayed behind to finish school. Alone in Germany and deeply unhappy, he dropped out and joined his family in Italy. There, he decided to apply to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, a school that valued aptitude over traditional qualifications. He failed the entrance exam the first time, except in math and physics, where he excelled. A year later, at 17, he was admitted. Chapter 3. The Patent Clerk's Revolution. Graduating from Zurich in 1900, Einstein struggled to find a teaching position. His blunt opinions and independent spirit alienated some professors. Eventually, he secured a modest job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern in 1902, evaluating technical patents. It was dull work for most, but Einstein turned it into a hidden laboratory of the mind. Here, amid diagrams and mechanical filings, he began dreaming of light. What would it be like to ride alongside a beam of light? Could time stop? Could the speed of light be relative? In the quiet of the patent office, during spare hours and late nights, Einstein began drafting ideas that would change physics forever. Chapter 4. Special Relativity. Time Unchained. In the silence of the Bern Patent Office, Albert Einstein launched the most elegant rebellion in the history of science and art, with weapons or slogans, but with thought experiments and logic. It was 1905. He was just 26 years old. That year, Einstein published 4 papers in the journal Annalen der Physik. These papers would later be called the Annus Mirabilis Miracle Year. Among them One stood out in particular: the theory of special relativity. The ether and the speed of light. At the turn of the 20th century, physicists believed that light needed a medium to travel through, like sound needs air. This hypothetical medium was called the luminiferous ether, but no experiment had ever detected this ether. Einstein proposed something radical. What if the ether didn't exist at all? Instead, what if the speed of light was constant, the same for all observers, regardless of how fast they were moving? This was revolutionary. If the speed of light was always constant, then something else had to change when you moved: time and space themselves. The two postulates. Einstein's theory of special relativity was built on two simple yet profound postulates. The laws of physics are the same in all inertial, non-accelerating frames of reference. The speed of light in a vacuum is constant and independent of the motion of the light source or observer. From these, Einstein derived conclusions that defied common sense. Time dilation. A moving clock ticks more slowly compared to one at rest. Length contraction. Objects appear shorter in the direction of motion when moving near the speed of light. Simultaneity is relative. Two events that are simultaneous in one frame may not be in another. In other words, time and space were not absolute. They were flexible, malleable, dependent on the observer's motion. Space-time is born. Einstein's view reshaped the Newtonian universe. In Newton's model, space and time were immutable, backdrop, sun-changing frameworks within which events occurred. But in Einstein's world, space and time were intertwined into a single fabric: space-time. Events were not just placed in 3 dimensions of space, but also in time, a 4th dimension. This radical idea wasn't just philosophy. It had mathematical precision and predictive power. And it introduced a new equation that would become the most famous in all of science. E 等于 mc al quadrat. E equals mc a quadrant, the equation that shook the world. This deceptively simple equation declared that energy, E, and mass, m, are interchangeable. They are the same thing, expressed in different forms. And the speed of light squared, c squared, is the conversion factor. In a universe governed by E equals mc a quart, a tiny amount of matter can be converted into an enormous amount of energy. At the time, this equation was a mathematical curiosity. But decades later, it would become the key to unlocking the energy of the atomic bomb, a truth Einstein himself would come to regret. Chapter 5. The Miracle Year, 1905. Einstein's 1,905 papers not only included special relativity, but also 3 others that revolutionized physics. Photoelectric effect. He showed that light behaves like a particle, a photon, not just a wave. This idea helped launch quantum mechanics. Brownian motion. He used the statistical mechanics to prove that atoms and molecules were real, settling a major debate in physics. Mass-energy equivalence. As discussed, E equals mc a squared changed everything. 4 papers. 1 year, 1 man. With no university position, no laboratory, and working full-time at the patent office, Einstein revolutionized modern physics. He would later say, with characteristic humility, "A storm broke loose in my mind, and recognition comes slowly." Despite the brilliance of his work, Einstein didn't become famous overnight. Physics was a conservative field, and his ideas were bold, perhaps too bold. It took years for the scientific community to catch up. It wasn't until 1909, when he was invited to speak at a physics conference in Salzburg, that he began to gain serious attention. By then, Einstein had left the patent office and taken academic posts in Zurich and Prague. Finally, the world was beginning to notice the quiet man who had dared to say time itself could bend. But the real explosion of fame would come a few years later with a theory even more profound. Chapter 6. General Relativity, Bending the Universe. While special relativity dealt with uniform motion, Einstein had bigger questions. What about acceleration? And more importantly, what exactly is gravity? Newton had defined gravity as a force between masses. Einstein suspected it was something deeper. In 1915, after nearly a decade of mental struggle and mathematical innovation, Einstein presented his masterpiece, the general theory of relativity. The core idea? Mass and energy curves, space-time, and objects move along those curves. What we experience as gravity is not a force pulling you, it's space itself bending. To visualize this, place a bowling ball on a trampoline. It creates a dent. Roll a marble across the surface, it spirals toward the dent, not because there's an invisible pull, but because the surface is curved. The math behind general relativity was stunningly elegant and stunningly difficult. Einstein relied on help from mathematician Marcel Grossmann to master the tools of Riemannian geometry, which described curved surfaces, prediction and proof. The eclipse of 1919. Einstein's theory made bold predictions, one of which was that light should bend around a massive object like the sun. In 1919, during a solar eclipse, British astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington led an expedition to test this. The results were spectacular. Light from distant stars appeared to bend as it passed near the sun, exactly as Einstein predicted. The headlines screamed, "Lights all askew in the heavens. Einstein theory triumphs." Overnight, Einstein became a global celebrity, a new kind of hero. Unlike traditional heroes, military leaders, royalty, politicians, Einstein was a scientist whose weapon was thought itself. His name became synonymous with genius. He toured the world, giving lectures in Europe, Asia, and America. Crowds gathered to see him. Newspapers printed his image. Children recognized his name. But fame came at a cost. Einstein remained an outsider pacifist during times of war, a Jew in a rising tide of anti-Semitism, a thinker in a world driven by power. And though he smiled and joked with crowds, he remained inwardly focused, his thoughts forever drifting across the geometry of the cosmos. Chapter 7. Fame, Fear, and Formulas. By 1920, the name Albert Einstein was no longer confined to the world of physics. It had become a symbol, a word spoken in coffee houses, whispered in universities, printed in headlines. He was not just a scientist, no way was a cultural icon. But fame, like gravity, has a pull, and not always a gentle one. The public genius, following the 1919 eclipse that confirmed his theory of general relativity, Einstein became a household name. In an age before television and internet, his face, wild-haired and mischievous, became instantly recognizable. He was invited everywhere: Tokyo, Paris, New York. Crowds came not just to hear him speak, but to witness a phenomenon. In America, they called him the new Copernicus. In Germany, he was hailed as a national treasure. Photographers captured his every move, and journalists hung on his every word. Yet Einstein remained at heart a recluse. He often said, "I live in that solitude which is painful in youth, but delicious in the years of maturity." He disliked the adulation and distrusted authority. To him, celebrity was a distraction, a mask over the real work of the mind, a voice for peace. Amid the chaos of post-World War I Europe, Einstein emerged as a rare voice of peace and reason. He became an outspoken pacifist, condemning nationalism and militarism. He supported internationalism and the creation of a League of Nations, and later, a world government. He also began to engage deeply in Zionism, but not the nationalist kind. Einstein believed in a cultural, spiritual homeland for Jews in Palestine, but strongly opposed the idea of a militarized Jewish state. As a Jew in Germany, he faced growing hostility. Anti-Semitism was rising, and the nationalist press targeted him viciously. Some branded his theory of relativity Jewish physics. In 1922, after the murder of his friend Walther Rathenau, Germany's Jewish foreign minister, Einstein carried a pistol for protection. Nobel Prize and the quantum rift. Though general relativity brought Einstein fame, it was not the reason he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. Instead, he was awarded for his explanation of the photoelectric effectus 1905 paper that laid the groundwork for quantum theory. But ironically, Einstein would soon become a vocal critic of quantum mechanics. The new theory, led by figures like Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger, suggested that the universe was fundamentally probabilistic, that particles didn't have precise positions or velocities until measured. Einstein couldn't accept this. He famously declared, "God does not play dice with the universe." For Einstein, the universe had to be orderly, deterministic. He believed quantum mechanics was incomplete, that a deeper, hidden layer of reality still awaited discovery. This disagreement would spark a lifelong philosophical and scientific debate that defined the second half of his career, a complicated personal life. Behind the public success, Einstein's personal life was fraught with difficulty. His marriage to Mileva Maric, the brilliant Serbian physicist he met in Zurich, had disintegrated. They officially divorced in 1919 after years of emotional strain. Einstein agreed to give her the Nobel Prize money if she signed the papers, a decision driven more by guilt than generosity. Their two sons, Hans Albert and Eduard, were deeply affected. Hans Albert became a successful engineer. Eduard, however, struggled with mental illness and spent most of his life in institutions. Einstein rarely visited him, a fact that haunted him for years. Shortly after his divorce, Einstein married his cousin, Elsa Lowenthal. While the marriage was more companionship than passion, Elsa managed the public pressures of Einstein's growing fame. Still, he remained emotionally distant. Letters and biographies reveal numerous extramarital affairs and a man who preferred thought to intimacy. He once wrote, "My passionate feelings are not directed toward individuals, but toward mankind, and even toward the universe." Eucharist, Chapter 8. Escape from Hitler's Shadow. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, the political skies over Germany darkened. The Nazi Party, once a fringe group, began to rise with terrifying speed. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Within weeks, Jewish academics were being purged from universities, books were burned, freedom collapsed. Einstein, then traveling in the United States, refused to return. He publicly resigned from the Prussian Academy of Sciences. His home in Berlin was raided. Nazi newspapers declared him an enemy of the German people. A right-wing magazine even published a hit list with Einstein's name and the words, "Not yet hanged." Einstein knew he was no longer safe. But more than that, he knew he had to act. A new home in America? In October 1933, Einstein arrived in the United States as a refugee. He accepted a position at the newly created Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, a quiet academic community where he could think freely without fear of persecution. There, he found relative peace. Einstein never fully learned English, never drove a car, and never wore socks. He became a fixture of Princeton, life-walking the streets with messy hair, talking with students, playing the violin at small gatherings. But he never forgot those he left behind. He worked tirelessly to help Jewish scientists escape Europe, writing letters of recommendation, organizing funding, and lobbying governments. He later said, "I am privileged by fate to live here in Princeton. In Europe, I should be unfree and afraid." Warning of the bomb. In 1939, as the world teetered on the edge of war again, Einstein received troubling news. Physicist Leo Szilard warned him that German scientists might be close to developing an atomic bombasing, the very principles of E equals mc acquired. Einstein, deeply alarmed, signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt urging the U.S. to begin research into nuclear weapons. That letter helped initiate the Manhattan Project. But Einstein himself was never involved in the project. The U.S. government considered him a security risk due to his pacifist views and political associations. Still, the knowledge that his science had helped unleash the most terrible weapon in history tormented him. He later declared, "Had I known that the Germans would not succeed in producing an atomic bomb, I would have never lifted a finger." A symbol of exile and hope, Einstein was now a man without a homeland. He renounced his German citizenship and became an American citizen in 1940. But he was never fully at ease. He watched as Europe burned, and later as the world slid into a Cold War. He spoke out against racism in America, calling segregation America's worst disease. He warned against McCarthyism, denouncing it as a betrayal of civil liberties. And through it all, he continued to think, to write, and to wonder. He once mused, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." In Chapter 9, Princeton and the Search for Unity. By the 1940s, Albert Einstein was no longer just the face of genius, was a man racing time. Though retired from teaching and laboratory work, he refused to retire from thought. He turned his attention to the most elusive dream of his life, the search for a unified field theory, an attempt to reconcile the deepest forces of the universe into a single framework. It was the ultimate puzzle, and he was determined to solve it before the world ran out. The Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, Einstein found a peculiar peace. His daily routine was predictable. Long walks, correspondence, violin playing, and solitary thought. He avoided public life whenever possible, spending his time instead in his modest office at the Institute for Advanced Study. He once said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." That curiosity was now aimed at a monumental goal, to unify the laws of nature. Newton had explained gravity. Maxwell had described electromagnetism. Einstein had shown that mass and energy were interchangeable. But the quantum world, the erratic behavior of particles, remained at odds with the smooth curvature of general relativity. To Einstein, this inconsistency was unacceptable. He believed that nature, at its deepest level, must be unified and harmonious. Unified field theory, a beautiful dream. Einstein's unified field theory aimed to bring gravitation and electromagnetism, the two known long-range forces, under a single theoretical umbrella. He worked obsessively on this problem, publishing paper after paper, each more mathematically complex than the last. Yet none gained traction in the wider physics community. By this time, quantum mechanics had taken over. The younger generation of physicists, like Richard Feynman and Paul Dirac, were exploring particle physics using probabilistic models and quantum fields. Einstein's refusal to accept quantum uncertainty made him seem increasingly out of step with modern physics. Many considered him a relic of a bygone era, respected, revered, but no longer relevant. Still, he pressed on. He once remarked, "I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomenon. I want to know his thoughts, the rest are details." The philosopher in exile, Einstein was not just a scientist, but a philosopher of science. He questioned the very foundations of knowledge. In conversations and letters, he mused on determinism, causality, and the nature of reality. He believed that mathematics was not just a tool, but a language in which the universe was written. He read widely. Spinoza, Kant, Schopenhauer. He often cited Spinoza's Godin impersonal divinity that existed in the order and beauty of nature. He rejected the idea of a personal God, famously saying, I do not believe in a personal God, and I have never denied this, but have expressed it clearly. His spiritual views attracted both admiration and controversy. Religious leaders often sought to claim or condemn him, but Einstein remained committed to what he called cosmic religion, a sense of awe before the mystery of existence. Letters from the Edge. Einstein received thousands of letters from scientists, students, pacifists, Zionists, and even children. He replied to many, always with wit, warmth, and insight. To a little girl who complained she couldn't be a scientist because she was a girl, he wrote, "Do not worry about your difficulties in mathematics. I can assure you mine are still greater. M." To another child, he explained relativity simply. "Put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, and it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour, and it seems like a minute. That's relativity." He also kept in touch with leading scientists around the world, especially those who, like him, were wrestling with the contradictions between relativity and quantum theory. But despite his persistence, the unified field theory never came to fruition. Chapter 10. The Bomb and the Burden. Einstein's greatest formula, E equals mc² unlocked the secrets of the atom. But the power it revealed could not be contained in equations. When unleashed, it transformed the world and haunted its creator. Hiroshima and the Atomic Age. On the 6th of August, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, another bomb fell on Nagasaki. Over 200 civilians perished. Einstein had not worked on the bomb, but his 1,939 letter to President Roosevelt had helped catalyze the project. When he heard the news, Einstein was devastated. He reportedly said, "Woe is me." For the rest of his life, he would campaign for nuclear disarmament. He co-founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, warning the public of the dangers of nuclear war. He declared, "The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and thus we drift toward unparalleled catastrophe." Cold War tensions. As the United States and Soviet Union entered the Cold War, Einstein became a vocal critic of nuclear arms buildup. He supported international cooperation, advocated for a world government, and warned against the militarization of science. This made him a target. During the McCarthy era, Einstein was accused of communist sympathies. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover kept a massive file on him over 1,400 pages. Einstein refused to testify before loyalty boards and encouraged others to resist unjust questioning. He said, "Laws alone cannot secure freedom of expression. In order that every man present his views without penalty, there must be a spirit of tolerance in the entire population." His advocacy for civil rights was equally bold. He publicly supported W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson and declared racism the worst disease in America. Einstein's moral courage was as profound as his intellectual brilliance. Final days. By the early 1950s, Einstein's health began to fail. He suffered from internal bleeding caused by a ruptured abdominal aneurysm. Doctors offered surgery, but Einstein refused. "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." On the 18th of April, 1955, Albert Einstein died in Princeton, New Jersey, at the age of 76. His brain was removed during autopsy without his family's permission by Dr. Thomas Harvey, who hoped to unlock the secrets of genius. The brain was sliced, preserved, and studied for decades, though no definitive conclusions were reached. Einstein's ashes were scattered in an undisclosed location, as per his wishes. He had left no monuments, no mausoleum, only ideas. A legacy that endures. Today, Einstein's name is synonymous with genius. His face adorns posters, books, mugs, and T-shirts. But beyond the icon is the Mantha thinker who challenged time, who reimagined gravity, who dared to speak truth in a dangerous world. He once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value." And in that, perhaps, he succeeded more than anyone. Chapter 11. The Philosopher-Scientist. Albert Einstein was more than a scientist, was a seeker. Beyond formulas and equations, he asked the oldest questions. What is reality? What is truth? What is God? His answers did not always align with the expectations of religion, nor with the probabilities of quantum theory, but they were always deeply, unmistakably his own. Beyond the lab, Einstein's thoughts wandered far beyond physics. He saw no boundary between science and philosophy. In fact, he believed that scientific revolutions were born not from experiments alone, but from shifts in how we conceptualize the world. He often quoted Immanuel Kant, whom he read as a teenager. He admired Baruch Spinoza, whose view of God as synonymous with nature resonated deeply with him. Einstein wrote, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with fates and actions of human beings." This idea of a non-personal, non-interventionist, God-shocked religious authorities, but it aligned with his view of the universe as governed by deterministic laws, not miracles or divine whims. His cosmic religion. Einstein coined the term cosmic religious feeling to describe the awe one feels before the mystery and order of the universe. He wrote, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science." He saw science and spirituality not as enemies, but as different lenses looking at the same truth. For him, discovering the elegance of the cosmos was a sacred pursuit. He resisted religious dogma, but admired the ethical teachings of prophets. His writings often carried a moral weight, calling for humility, peace, and human unity. Einstein versus quantum mechanics. In the 1930s and 1940s, Einstein continued to battle the new interpretation of quantum mechanics. To him, it was incomplete, a statistical tool that lacked deeper explanation. In 1935, he co-authored the EPR paper, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, which challenged the theory's assumptions. The paper described a scenario in which two particles could become entangled linked so that one state instantly affects the other, regardless of distance. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. He saw it as a flaw. But ironically, this phenomenon would later be confirmed and become a foundational part of quantum entanglement, essential to modern technologies like quantum computing. Despite mounting evidence, Einstein held firm. He couldn't accept a world where outcomes were determined by chance. "God does not play dice with the universe," he famously said, to which Niels Bohr reportedly replied, "Stop telling God what to do." 9. Thought experiments. Einstein's genius lay not in laboratories, but in imagination. He didn't rely on machines, relied on Gedanken experiments, thought experiments. He imagined riding alongside a beam of light, falling in an elevator, and clocks on speeding trains. These simple yet profound mental exercises allowed him to explore the limits of physical law in ways that blackboards and telescopes never could. This method has influenced generations of physicists and philosophers. A universal morality. Einstein believed that science could not answer ethical questions, but that ethics must guide science. He opposed war, racism, censorship, and inequality. He believed in education, compassion, and civic responsibility. To him, nationalism was dangerous, racism was illogical, power should always be tempered by conscience. He wrote, "Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." Chapter 12. Love, Letters, and Loneliness. Behind the equations and accolades, Einstein remained a man curious, conflicted, and at times deeply alone. While he loved humanity, he often struggled with personal relationships. His letters reveal not just a brilliant mind, but a searching heart. Mileva Maric, the forgotten partner? Einstein met Mileva Maric at the Polytechnic Institute in Zurich. She was one of the few female physics students in Europe and brilliant in her own right. Their early relationship was passionate, intellectual, and deeply connected. They shared books, ideas, and dreams. But their partnership faced obstacles: academic jealousy, societal expectations, and emotional tension. In 1902, their first daughter, Liesl, was born out of wedlock. Her fate remains a mystery. Some believe she died young or was given up for adoption. Einstein and Mileva married in 1903 and had two more sons, Hans Albert and Eduard. But as Einstein's fame grew, the marriage deteriorated. He became cold and distant. In letters, he proposed a list of rigid conditions for Mileva to stay in the marriage, including, "You will not expect any intimacy from me." They divorced in 1919. Einstein later gave Mileva the Nobel Prize money to ensure the financial stability of her and their children. Eduard, the tragic son. Einstein's younger son, Eduard, showed early promise in the arts and psychology, but began displaying signs of schizophrenia in his teens. He was eventually institutionalized in Zurich, where he lived most of his life. Einstein, living in America and absorbed in his work, wrote to him but rarely visited. The distance haunted him. He once confessed to a friend, "This is the deepest sorrow of my life." Elsa, and later companionship. Shortly after his divorce, Einstein married his cousin Elsa Lowenthal. Their marriage was more stable, but not always affectionate. Elsa managed his schedule, kept up appearances, and shielded him from the demands of fame. Privately, Einstein maintained a series of romantic affairs with other women, including his secretary and various admirers. Many of these relationships were documented in letters made public after his death. To some, this painted a picture of emotional coldness. To others, it showed the complexity of a man who was brilliant in mind but flawed in intimacy. Letters of Light and Loneliness. Einstein was a prolific letter writer. His correspondence spans thousands of pages letters to scientists, lovers, children, presidents, and strangers. In his letters, we find vulnerability. "I am a lone traveler and have never belonged to my country, my home, my friends, or even my immediate family." He found comfort in music, especially Mozart and Bach. He once said, "Life without playing music is inconceivable for me." Playing the violin wasn't just a hobby, it was a form of meditation, a way to order the chaos within. Humor and humanity. Einstein's wit was legendary. He joked about his hair. "If I were to comb it, it would only look worse." He mocked bureaucracy. An empty stomach is not a good political advisor. And when asked to explain relativity to a layman, he said, "When you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it seems like 2 minutes. But when you sit on a hot stove for 2 minutes, it seems like 2 hours. That's relativity. Behind the humor was a deep love for simplicity. Einstein believed that truth should be beautiful and that complex ideas could be explained with clarity. Chapter 13, Legacy Beyond Light. Einstein once said, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." By that measure, his life was rich beyond calculation. But what truly remains when a man dies? Ideas, influence, inspiration. In the case of Albert Einstein, the legacy goes far beyond physics it shaped, how humanity sees itself and the cosmos. Einstein's scientific legacy. Einstein's greatest scientific contributions continue to shape modern physics. Special relativity is the foundation of modern space-time theory, essential for high-speed physics, GPS, satellites, and nuclear energy. General relativity predicted black holes. Gravitational lensing and gravitational wave search confirmed decades after his death. E equals mc al quadrant forms the basis of nuclear fission and fusion, powering the sun and modern reactors. His work also inspired the rise of quantum field theory, cosmology, and string theory, even though he disagreed with some of these developments. Many physicists today still view Einstein as the ultimate symbol of intuition-driven science. As Stephen Hawking once said, Einstein is a towering figure in the history of physics, perhaps the greatest since Newton. The Einstein symbol. Einstein's image-wild hair, pipe in hand, eyes twinkling with wisdom has become an icon across cultures. He appears in cartoons, commercials, posters, even video games. He is the shorthand for genius. His name evokes creativity, curiosity, and independent thinking. But this iconography also risks simplifying him. Einstein was not always right. He made mistakes, he resisted quantum mechanics too long, he failed to unify the fields, he had personal flaws. Still, his willingness to challenge orthodoxy, to follow thought wherever it led, became a model for thinkers everywhere. Global reverence. Einstein's legacy stretches beyond science. In education, he's quoted in classrooms from Beijing to Boston. In ethics, he's revered as a pacifist and humanitarian. In politics, he's cited by both left and right as a voice of reason. In religion, his views continue to stir debate and dialogue. Nations name schools, streets, and institutions after him. The Albert Einstein College of Medicine, the Einstein crater on the moon, and the element Einsteinium on the periodic table all bear his name. The Einstein Archives. More than 30,000 documents, letters, manuscripts, equations are preserved in the Albert Einstein Archives at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, an institution he helped establish. These papers offer a portal into the mind of a man who lived through revolutions, scientific, political, and personal, and never stopped seeking clarity. Digital archives make these works accessible to scholars and students around the world. Einstein's warnings. As the atomic age advanced, Einstein's warnings grew more urgent. He said, "The world is in greater peril from those who tolerate or encourage evil than from those who actually commit it." He feared a future in which humanity's technology would outpace its morality. To prevent this, he championed disarmament, world peace, and global cooperation. His last public act, just days before his death, was signing the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, calling on world leaders to reduce the threat of nuclear war. Epilogue. The eternal equation. Albert Einstein died on the 18th of April, 1955. But in a sense, he never left. His ideas ripple through every satellite orbit, every nuclear plant, every scientific conference. He didn't just explain the universe, he changed our relationship with it. What Einstein gave us. Einstein gave us more than theories. He gave us a new way of thinking. He reminded us that intuition, creativity, and imagination are as essential to science as mathematics and experimentation. He gave the world a hero who wasn't a warrior, king, or tycoon, but a thinker, a dreamer, a refugee, a human. He proved that one mind can change the course of history. His own words. In one of his final letters, Einstein wrote, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existence." This became the motto for generations of students and scientists. Curiosity, he believed, was the divine spark that moved civilizations forward. He also said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." And in that humility lies the secret of his greatness. A message for the future. As the world faces new challenges, climate change, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, deep space exploration, Einstein's legacy feels more relevant than ever. He showed us that science must serve humanity, Knowledge must be paired with wisdom. Power must be balanced by conscience. He warned against the dangers of blind nationalism, racial prejudice, and moral indifference. And he believed deeply in the power of education, dialogue, and global citizenship. The human equation. In the end, Einstein's most lasting contribution may not be in numbers, but in meaning. He taught us that the universe is not just cold equations and sterile particles, but a place of wonder, order, and beauty. He reminded us that the greatest discoveries begin not with certainty, but with a question. And he proved that even in a chaotic world, a single voice, quiet, determined, and curious, can bend the arc of history. He redefined time. He bent space. He transformed light. But in doing so, Albert Einstein gave us something even more powerful: the courage to wonder.